the Florida Writer Podcast, a discussion about writing and other things.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Alison Nissen. And today I am lucky enough to be with Reverend Barbara Lane. Barbara, welcome to the Florida Writer Podcast.
Oh, thank you, Allison. You don't know what it means to me to be on a writer's podcast. Thank you for having me.
Could you give us a 60-second elevator pitch about who you are and what you write?
Sure, from the top floor down. I'm a work in progress, and I have to say I've enjoyed just about every step of the way on my journey, except for my earlier years. I lost my family when I was 3 and ended up in a very abusive foster home. I spent most of my youth striving to survive that and relocate with my sisters, of which we were 11 girls. I'm happy to say that both things occurred. Pardon me. I not only survived, but I did reunite with my long lost sisters 43 years later. Looking back, I realized that provided me with a rich and valuable source of knowledge, wisdom, and passion, all of which I brought forward with me in my educational background, which occurred later in my life. I studied human development and social sciences, family psychology, and the importance of attachment and bonding, soul to soul, in the healing process. I then opened my own practice for about 25 years, where I worked with families, abused kids, their families, individuals, couples, who walked the same path. Once I reunited with my sister several years later, I was honored beyond all I can't even explain, to gather all 11 sister stories of abandonment and abuse, reunion, and resilience. And I present them in my memoir, Broken Water, which came out in May. And now, not having a history of writing, I am so honored to sit here with you on a writer's podcast. I can't believe it. So thank you so much. This is such a pleasure.
Well, Barbara, I think we're all writers, but more importantly, we all have stories. I am that is, I believe my mission is to help people be able to tell their stories. Beautiful. And so I'm your journey is remarkable and probably a little difficult to share sometimes. But wow, one of 11 sisters. That's just right there. So when you were 3, when you were placed into foster care, were you the youngest?
I was the 9th.
And then there were 2 more later. Wow. Okay.
Right.
Wow. And how old was the oldest?
My eldest sister will be 86, and my youngest just turned 61.
That's a little bit of a spread.
Yeah.
And so
it's time to have all those babies.
Wow. Yes. As much as I could spend the entire podcast talking about your journey and how that happened, but I really want to talk about how you were able to, okay, first of all, you count yourself blessed that you were able to gather your sisters and their stories, their journeys. And I want to commend them for how brave they were, because I've started my writing career as a ghostwriter, and I wrote for people who could not share their story. They could tell it, but they couldn't put those words on paper because it was just too painful, and they didn't know how to even put the words in the right order for people to understand. Correct. So the fact that you were able to do that is really an unbelievable journey. And what gave you the strength to be able to say, okay, it's my turn to tell this story?
So, my history, number one, gave me a passion on the subject matter. My gratitude to my older sisters for having loved me and nurtured me and cared for me in ways that I remembered, even though I was so young, led me to do anything and everything for them in the way of gratitude. And when we were united, they had that same love and compassion and nurturance for all of us. We have such an amazing sisterhood. And when they asked me to do this, there was no way I would say no. I didn't view myself as a writer. Wrote, research papers, theses, things like that, some workbooks, but I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. And it was beautiful to discover, as you age, you discover you have skills you didn't know you had. And so this is one of them that I thought, oh, wow, this is coming together rather nicely, although painful in many cases. But when they asked, I said yes.
And the exposing of that,
Mm-hmm.
did you feel like your wounds were healed enough, and did they feel like their wounds were healed enough that they could share that? Or was it a catharsis?
I think that one of the best ways to answer that question is to have you know and have the listeners know most of the sisters did not know the other sisters' history until May when the book was released. And it was because it was so painful. The younger sisters didn't want the older sisters to know because they felt like they'd feel guilty, that they should have protected us. The older sisters just kept their stuff to themselves because it was pretty much the way things were back then. But each sister has exclaimed to me once when I was gathering their stories that there was much healing with each story shared for the first time, one-on-one with a sister they felt they could trust was very healing. And number two, the cathartic experience of sharing that, the strength, the bravery, the courage to share their stories was equally healing for them. So all in all, it's been an adventure. And we had a pact that if one sister decided they did not want to do this, none of us would. We would just drop it right there. But they all wanted to share, knowing their stories could be helpful to others who have had the same experiences and have had to keep it all in secrecy. So this busts that secrecy, it shatters it wide open, hopefully for others as well.
I feel like I don't even know which questions to ask next because I have so many. I just have so many. Let's talk about the writing. Okay, so I know we've all experienced, we all have stories in our past that build who we are. And as I mentioned, was ghostwriting for people, they would often worry that they were wounding me with their stories. And of course, to me, I was a bystander. But did you feel like a bystander because you were actually part of this group?
No, I never felt like a bystander. And actually, I struggled with their stories as well. They were heartbreaking, and these were my sisters. And you don't want anything to happen to your sisters. I had always hoped that myself and my one sister, Kay, that were placed in this foster home of a mafia grunt, by the way, were the only ones that had this horrible experience. When I was to learn that all 11 of us experienced sexual abuse in our childhoods, it was heart-shattering. So I cannot tell you the number of tears I cried writing this book, listening to their stories, the hugs we shared, the catharsis we all went through, and I went through over and over and over again, gathering each sister's story. So I was never an outsider. Like when you're counseling, you're kind of well, I do a different kind of counseling, kind of soul to soul, I say. But when this is your sister, breaking out in hives because of the stories they're telling you, and it's heartbreaking.
I can only imagine. When you started to look for beta readers, when you started to look for people that could just help you shape the book, what was their experience?
I didn't look for anyone until I had all the stories gathered. And basically because I told my sisters I wouldn't change their stories. So I'm kind of a top-down learner. The more I read, the more I can kind of see how someone pieced a story together or a memoir. So I read a lot. I still am a reader. But once I had everyone's story together, I had a rough of it and I looked for book agents, and I did find book agents, put me in front of publishers, and I backed down because there was the risk they could change their stories. And I had promised my sisters that would not happen. So then I just looked for independent editors, and I found a fantastic editor who writes encyclopedias. And that was so perfect because we had so many characters and so many timelines. I was struggling with the structure of when and how and where. And he was incredibly helpful with that. And that's really, I had like another developmental editor who helped me somewhat, but this encyclopedia writer, Max, was incredible. And he wasn't too involved in the emotion of the story, which was helpful. And after that, I just went to a copy editor and then, went from there. So I think it went well. I didn't ever have a beta reader, and it's selling well. But again, that's not my purpose. I mean, I am getting nothing but positive feedback and wonderful comments and thank yous from and I sold many copies in just a couple of months. So it must be a message that people need to hear. And I don't always go about things the way traditional people do. So all in all, I'm open to input all the time, but I think we've got a pretty good book right now.
Well, I just want to add, what is tradition? We all,
right?
Everybody's approaching life from a slightly different angle. So.
Exactly. And to take the traditional step, I was on that route, but I was very fearful. If I signed away that book, I was signing away my soul in a way and the promises I had made to my sisters. So I just thought it's not worth it.
You mentioned you went back to school later in life.
I did.
Tell me, what? So all of a sudden you decided, now's the time to go to school. I love that you did that because so many people, it's not their time when they're 18 years old to go to college. It's not even their time when they're 25.
Yeah.
But, you have to have a lifetime of experiences sometimes to get into the right path.
Well, my case is pretty common among kids that grew up in foster care or abusive homes. It impacts the way you learn. As a child, I was told I was the R word, the word I will not even use, and I believed it. So, the thought of going to higher education is just something you don't even consider. Once I entered really deep therapy, my therapist proved me wrong. She said, "You are not the R word. Matter of fact, you're rather intelligent." And so with her encouragement, I started at a community college. I mean, I was just sweating bullets the first day. Found out I just really loved the psychology courses. Transferred over to the University of Maryland. Graduated 1 credit shy of summa cum laude because I had 1 transfer credit from St. Louis too much. And then, member of Phi Kappa Phi. And I still didn't prove to myself that I wasn't the R word. It takes a long time to overcome those messages you received in your childhood. During graduate studies, one of my professors said, "You're a born writer," right over my head. I didn't even hear it. It's like, "Oh, thank you." And, I'm going to go on and keep studying and keep pushing. But I was 35 before I entered college, and you could think, what a waste. What could you have done if you had started earlier? And I'm going to say no. And once you start a healing process, life opens up in such exciting ways that maybe even if I didn't have my history when I was 18, I wouldn't have appreciated. I could not study enough. I could not read enough. I was like a kid in a candy store. Give me more knowledge. It was just a beautiful, wonderful thing that I don't know if I would have experienced at a younger day. So, like you said earlier, you're where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be. And the culmination in this book that's being so well received is just like, wow, really? This is just a beautiful thing. And it tells me you're never done uncovering your gifts or what you might want to pursue, no matter your age. So that's where I'm at now.
So you had a professor that said, "Hey, you're a great writer," and you didn't hear the message.
No.
No. At what point did you say, "All right, I gotta fulfill this writing thing"?
I didn't know this would even become a book when I started writing my sister's stories down. But as I read them, and as my husband, my soulmate, read them, he said, "This is beautiful." And then they said to me, my sister said, "Well, maybe this should be a book." Okay, I've never written a book. That's a lie. I wrote a little tiny book called The Red Sun Umbrella, which was just for my grandson who was very ill at the time. And I put it on Amazon for him. It's still on there. I don't know. It's like the needle in the haystack at this point. But so I did do that. But I started as a minister, I started writing services for people, wedding services, baptismals, house blessings, and funeral services. And I should have realized at that point, hey, I didn't know this, but I'm a writer. And they were beautiful, their comments, everybody loved them, but it still didn't resonate with me. I don't think it hit me that I'm a good writer probably till I publish a book May 9th. So here I am, and I can't deny what people are saying anymore, I guess. And so it spurred me on, like, what am I going to write next? It's such a passion now. I'm just in love with this.
All right. So what are you going to write next?
I've got a couple workbooks outlined for individuals that want to pursue a path toward healing. But I'm also going to write a novel about a past life memory that I have. And I think that's going to be really fun to write.
Well, you'll have to let me know, because I'm going to be interested in that one too.
Okay.
Well, Barbara Lane, how can people learn more about your book? It's called Broken Waters. Is that right?
That's right. Broken Water. And you can get, if you want an autographed copy, I've begun to offer them on my website, barbaralane.info. I really love supporting local bookstores. So if you go to a local bookstore and have them order it, that would be lovely. Some of them are carrying a couple copies, but you can also order it. It's available online through any bookstore, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere. I think it is pretty much available, Kindle, whatever. And I'm working on an Audible, so that should be released within a few months.
Are you reading it?
I haven't quite decided. I mean, I've started. Everyone says I should read it. So what do you think?
I think you should, although it would be great if you could get your sisters to read each of their chapters.
Well, we have 5 in heaven now, sadly. And I'm sure there'd be a little bit of a skirmish over who would read whose in a fun way, sisters. So
how wonderful that you've been able to reconnect with everyone.
It's been a delight.
Barbara, are you ready to switch to our rapid fire questions?
I'm gonna try.
What is your favorite color?
Oh, blue, always blue, like the blue sea.
If you were going to make someone your favorite meal, what would it be?
Oh, it'd have to be. I grew up in a Sicilian family, as awful as it was. Boy, was the food delicious. So I would have to make Sicilian pasta sauce that simmers all day with the meatballs, with just the right ingredients and pasta.
And if you could invent one thing that would make the world better, what would it be?
A way to recycle all trash.
Right? Like a magnet. Boop.
Yeah, a way to protect Mother Earth a little better than what we do.
Barbara Lane, thank you so much for stopping by.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been such a delight talking with you. I appreciate it.
You have been listening to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Alison Nissen. Alison out. Boom. We're all done. Reverend Barbara Lane integrates her life experiences of being a foster child, sister, wife, mother, grandmother, entrepreneur, speaker, child advocate, educator, ministerial counselor, and author into her writing. By sharing her own personal journey, Barbara destigmatizes the fate of child abuse survivors, leading her to write her memoir, Broken Water. In addition to her 25-year service in private practice as a ministerial counselor, Barbara's educational background in human development, social sciences, and family psychology with a focus on child abuse inspires her to share her experiences on interrelated issues: the family separation, the foster care system, attachment and bonding, child maltreatment, relationship formation, the resilience of the human spirit, healing from trauma, and the power found in having faith in something greater than the self. When not writing, you will find Barbara enjoying nature, reading, swimming, playing sports, and people watching. She especially enjoys spending time with her grandchildren. Barbara lives in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia with her husband Jim, who remains her childhood sweetheart. For more information about Barbara, visit her at barbaralane.info. For more information about the Florida Writers Association, visit us at floridawriters.org. Until next time.